My story begins with a childhood shrouded in shadows. From a young age, I was always ignored while my brother received all the attention and affection. He was the shining star that overshadowed everyone around, and I, a mere specter, lost in the gloom. My parents were blinded by the pride and love they felt for him, unable to see his obvious flaws, while I was relegated to oblivion. In the early years, the indifference was tolerable, but everything changed with adolescence. The brilliance my brother once emanated began to fade, and his frustration turned into cruelty. He lost friends and, with no one to unload his bitterness on, he turned against me. Living with him was like being under the rule of a tyrant, each day a silent battle. My parents, always ready to boast about his achievements, ignored his cruelties. To them, I was merely a convenient receptacle for their frustrations and lies. One time, he started accusing me of things I hadn't done. Suddenly, I was the scapegoat, the one to blame for everything wrong in his life. This caused my parents to limit my freedom, isolating me from the few friends I had. What saved me from complete isolation was my extended family. At a family gathering, I confided in my cousins about my situation. The words traveled to the adults, who severely reprimanded my parents. The shame was so great that my brother decided to change schools, trying to escape the weight of his own mistakes. However, this brought no relief. He continued to torment me, now with the help of his new friends. They would come to our house and turn my life into a daily hell. My parents called it light teasing, while I sank deeper and deeper into despair. This was when I grew even closer to my cousins, as my parents didn't dare confront the family. If you like following stories, reports, and surprising revelations seen on Reddit, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. During this time, I met my first girlfriend. I avoided bringing her home, but my parents insisted. Soon, she told me that my brother was hitting on her, speaking ill of me while wearing indecent clothes. When I confronted my parents, they believed his version, not mine. The relationship ended. I tried again with another girl, but the story repeated itself. My parents always believed him, and so another relationship ended in frustration. My brother brought a girlfriend home, and as expected, my parents idolized her. When she stopped coming around, suddenly, she became the villain of the story. The disparity in treatment was glaring. He had more money, more freedom, while I had nothing. When I questioned this injustice, my parents denied it or simply said he was more trustworthy. Do I know why they treat me like this? I've been asked this question a lot, so I assume you all will think the same. I have wondered this all my life and I still don't know. I tried asking when I was young, but they denied any difference and scolded me for acting spoiled, so I quit trying. I've thought of so many possibilities, but based on my observations, I think it's this: I was unplanned. They took a while to have my brother, so he was not only wanted but also like a miracle child after so long. However, given our age difference is quite small, I think they didn't expect to have a kid so soon or easily and didn't use adequate protection way too soon after my brother's birth and maybe didn't notice my mom was pregnant until too late. So they were saddled with an unplanned baby while still dealing with a newborn, and they're not that well off, so having the extra expense likely didn't help. So they resented me. But that's my conjecture. Regardless, I've accepted the answer won't truly matter. What they did to me was unwarranted, no matter what. When my brother graduated, he was accepted into a mediocre college without a scholarship. My parents made a big fuss and promised to pay for everything. As my graduation approached, my mother said they had no money for my college and that I should start working immediately. If I wanted to continue living at home, I would have to pay for everything. I could take out student loans, but my parents would decide if the college was worth it. Without expectations, I agreed. I worked hard and earned a full scholarship to a good college. I announced my achievement on social media and to my parents. They couldn't stop me, as they would have to explain to the family. My brother wasn't doing well in college, and my parents tried to make me quit, but I stood my ground. College was my salvation. I began to be happy and avoided introducing any girl to them. My brother dropped out of college and started working at the same company as my mother. Life seemed to be adjusting, at least partially. I met my wife during this period of change. She was my opposite, brave and ready to face any challenge. When we discussed our wedding, we decided to keep the ceremony simple and spend more on the honeymoon. My parents demanded to meet my future wife, and she was prepared to confront them. They proposed paying for the wedding if my brother walked down the aisle first, wearing a wedding dress. My wife pretended to agree so we could plan our revenge. She suggested hiring security to prevent my brother from entering the ceremony. On the wedding day, my parents tried to execute their ridiculous plan, but the security barred my brother at the entrance. My mother, furious, threatened to call the police, but the security guards were just doing their job. When my parents realized they couldn't succeed, they tried to control the damage, but news of their absurd plan spread quickly. Everyone was horrified. My brother was on the ground, crying and screaming, while my parents tried, in vain, to justify their actions. The ceremony proceeded smoothly, and we had a wonderful party. My parents and brother were expelled from the venue. After the wedding, my wife and I documented our happiness on social media, subtly rubbing our joy in their faces. Our relationship flourished, and for the first time, I felt a sense of stability and security. Distance made me see my parents and brother as flawed individuals, no longer dominant and threatening figures. One day, out of the blue, I received a message from my cousin. He wanted to meet up for coffee. I hadn't seen him in a while, and I was curious to know what he had been up to. We met at a local cafe, and after the usual pleasantries, he broached the subject I had been avoiding, my parents. "They've been asking about you," he said, stirring his coffee. "I think they're trying to figure out how to mend things." I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. "Mend things? After everything they've done?" I know, he said quickly. "But they're family, and family has a way of getting under your skin, no matter what." I sighed. I don't know if I can forgive them. Not after all the lies, the favoritism, the manipulation. "It's not about forgiving them for their sake," he said gently. "It's about finding peace for yourself. Holding on to all that anger, it's only going to hurt you in the long run." He was right, of course. Deep down, I knew that holding on to my anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. But knowing something and acting on it are two different things. I promised my cousin I would think about it, and we parted ways with a hug. Over the next few weeks, I found myself mulling over our conversation. Could I really forgive my parents? What would that even look like? I didn't want to let them back into my life only to be hurt again. But I also didn't want to spend the rest of my life carrying the weight of my resentment. My wife, ever the voice of reason, encouraged me to take things one step at a time. "Maybe start with a letter," she suggested one night as we lay in bed. "You don't have to send it, but it might help you process your feelings." So, I did. I sat down at my desk and began to write. I wrote about my childhood, the pain of being constantly compared to my brother, the hurt of never being believed or supported. I wrote about the joy I felt on my wedding day, seeing my parents and brother get what they deserved. And I wrote about my struggle to find forgiveness, not for their sake, but for mine. As I poured my heart out onto the pages, I felt a sense of release. The words flowed freely, and with each sentence, I felt a little lighter. When I finished, I set the letter aside and took a deep breath. I wasn't sure what I would do with it, but for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to move forward. Over time, I began to consider the possibility of reconciliation. I called my cousin and asked him to arrange a casual meeting with my parents. At the cafe, the conversation was timid, but a start. My parents admitted their mistakes and apologized. I decided to give it a chance, cautiously, to rebuild our relationship. My wife and I continued building our life together. We discovered we were expecting our first child, and the news brought immense joy. My parents promised to be good grandparents, and for the first time, I believed them. When our daughter was born, I felt a deep sense of purpose and responsibility. I promised to be the father I always wanted, creating a family based on love and mutual support. Seeing my parents with my daughter, their eyes filled with tears of happiness, gave me hope for the future. Life isn't perfect, but I learned that forgiveness is a continuous journey. Looking at my daughter, I see the promise of a better tomorrow, a chance to create the family I always dreamed of. This is my story, one of pain and betrayal, but also of hope and redemption. Finding my voice, standing up for myself, and building a life full of love and joy. Forgiving not just my parents, but myself, finding the strength to move forward and create a future brighter than the past ever was. If you liked this story and don't want to miss any of Reddit's next amazing stories, subscribe below and turn on notifications. Here every week you will discover hidden stories from Reddit.